The massive observation deck of Armstrong Station hung suspended in Earth orbit, its curved transparent steel walls offering an unparalleled view of humanity's greatest achievement to date. Thomas Reed pressed his palm against the cool surface, eyes fixed not on the blue marble of Earth below, but on the gleaming starships under construction in the orbital shipyards beyond. They're magnificent, aren't they? Thomas turned to find Admiral James Miller standing beside him, the weathered lines of his face illuminated by the reflected light of the distant sun. The Admiral's eyes held the same reverence Thomas felt, a mixture of pride and anticipation. "Yes, sir. I've never seen anything like them." The starships represented the culmination of a century of technological advancement, resource allocation, and international cooperation. 5 vessels, each nearly a kilometer long, their hulls a complex lattice of titanium alloys and carbon nanotubes designed to withstand the harshness of interstellar space. The Pioneer, the Discovery, the Endeavor, the Horizon, and the Pathfinder, Admiral Miller recited, pointing to each vessel in turn. Humanity's first true interstellar fleet. Thomas had studied the specifications obsessively since being selected for the program. Each vessel could accommodate 2,000 colonists in rotating habitation rings that simulated Earth gravity. Their fusion drives could accelerate to 12% of light speed, making the journey to Alpha Centauri possible within 40 years. "Do you think we're ready, Admiral?" Thomas asked, voicing the doubt that had plagued him since his selection. "As a species, I mean." Miller didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to a small gathering of people from various nations on the observation deck, engineers, scientists, and fellow astronauts turned colonists. "Look at them, Reed. 100 years ago, they would have been pointing nuclear weapons at each other. Now they're collaborating on the greatest journey mankind has ever undertaken." A group of school children entered the observation deck, their excited chatter filling the space as they pressed their faces against the glass, pointing and gasping at the starships. "We've always been explorers," the Admiral continued. "From the first humans who left Africa, to the sailors who crossed oceans, to the pioneers who settled new continents, it's in our DNA to expand, to discover, to reach beyond our grasp." Thomas watched as a young girl, no more than 8 years old, stared wide-eyed at the vessels. Her expression of pure wonder mirrored what he felt when he first saw the blueprints. "The stars have called to us since we first looked up at the night sky," Miller said. "Every civilization throughout history has dreamed of touching them. And now we finally can." A gentle chime sounded throughout the station, signaling the beginning of final crew preparations. Thomas straightened, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "The real question," Admiral Miller said, clapping Thomas on the shoulder, "isn't whether we're ready to go to the stars. It's whether the stars are ready for us." As Thomas took one last look at Earth, at the continents and oceans that had cradled humanity for hundreds of thousands of years, he understood that they stood at the precipice of something monumental. The starships weren't just vehicles. They were vessels of hope, carrying the indomitable human spirit outward into the cosmos. The allure of the stars had finally proven irresistible, and humanity was answering their call. The engineering bay of the Pathfinder hummed with activity as Dr. Alan Foster guided the international inspection team through the heart of the massive starship. The propulsion section stretched nearly half a kilometer, dominated by the immense fusion drive that would push the vessel to speeds once thought impossible. "The breakthrough came when we stopped trying to reinvent physics," Alan explained, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "We focused instead on perfecting what we already knew was possible." Commander Lisa Jackson, the vessel's chief engineer, nodded in agreement. "We're standing inside what is essentially a controlled nuclear fusion reaction, harnessed for propulsion instead of power generation." The fusion drive represented the culmination of the ITER project that had begun in the early 21st century. What had started as an experimental energy solution had evolved into the most powerful propulsion system ever created by human hands. Deuterium and helium-3 fusion, Lisa continued, pointing to the massive magnetic containment systems. The reaction creates charged particles that we accelerate through electromagnetic fields, generating thrust without the need for physical propellant. Alan activated a holographic display showing the complete propulsion system. The beauty is in the efficiency. Traditional chemical rockets were limited by the rocket equation. You needed to carry all your propellant with you. Our fusion drive uses minimal fuel for maximum thrust, and the magnetic sails allow us to harvest interstellar hydrogen for additional acceleration. The inspection team moved to the next section, where a forest of superconducting magnets formed the vessel's magnetic sail system, an elegant supplement to the main drive. At cruising speed, the magnetic sail creates a bubble around the ship that deflects interstellar particles, Alan explained. But it also captures some of those particles and funnels them into the fusion reactor as additional fuel. Professor Robert Way from the United Nations Space Administration stroked his beard thoughtfully. And the deceleration phase? Lisa smiled. The magnetic sail reverses polarity, essentially creating drag against the interstellar medium. We'll also use the gravitational pull of Alpha Centauri, A, for a slingshot maneuver that bleeds off speed. What about radiation protection? Asked another inspector. Alan gestured to the layered hull visible through a nearby viewport. The same magnetic fields that control the fusion reaction create a bubble around the entire vessel, deflecting cosmic rays and solar radiation. The hull itself contains water reservoirs that provide additional shielding. The team proceeded to the emergency propulsion backup, a series of antimatter catalyzed nuclear pulse units that could be deployed if the main drive failed. We're only carrying 5 grams of antimatter, Lisa said, noting the concerned looks. It's contained in magnetic suspension and separated into microscopically small quantities. But even this tiny amount, used to catalyze nuclear reactions, could push us for years if necessary. As the inspection concluded, Alan led the team to a small observation blister that offered a view of the entire propulsion array from the exterior. Humanity has always been defined by our ability to move, to traverse oceans, continents, and skies, he said quietly. These drives are just the latest chapter in that story. Professor Way stared at the gleaming machinery with obvious emotion. Our ancestors crossed oceans in wooden ships, powered by nothing but wind. They would be proud to see how far we've come. Alan nodded. And yet, the principles remain the same. We're still sailors, harnessing the forces of nature to carry us to distant shores. The propulsion systems of the interstellar fleet represented not just the pinnacle of human engineering, but the fulfillment of an ancient dream. To reach beyond the world that birthed us and touch the distant lights that had guided us for millennia. The holographic projection filled the central chamber of the Horizons Design Lab, displaying a complete 3-dimensional model of the vessel. Captain Michael Evans circled the projection slowly, listening as Chief Designer Olivia Brown explained the ship's architecture to the delegation of international officials. Unlike the ocean-going vessels of old or even the space stations of the last century, a starship must be entirely self-sufficient for decades, Olivia said, manipulating the display to highlight different sections. It's not just a ship, it's a city, a farm, a factory, and an ecosystem. The Horizon, like its sister ships, was designed around a central spine nearly a kilometer long. From this spine extended multiple rotating habitation rings, each turning at precisely calculated speeds to create artificial gravity through centrifugal force. The outermost rings rotate at 1 g, mimicking Earth's gravity, Olivia explained. Inner rings provide partial gravity environments minus 0.8 g, 0.6 g, and 0.3 g for both industrial purposes and medical requirements. Michael gestured to the massive spherical structure at the ship's fore. This is our shield, a 200-meter ice ball. At 12% of light speed, even dust particles become deadly projectiles. The ice absorbs or deflects impacts and can be replenished from water stores. The delegation moved through the hologram, examining the intricate details of life support systems that recycled everything from air to waste with nearly perfect efficiency. The agricultural rings are our lifeline, Michael continued, highlighting vast hydroponics chambers and vertical farms. We grow algae, vegetables, fruits, and even raise fish and insects for protein. The system is designed to feed 2,000 people indefinitely, with a 300% redundancy factor. One official raised his hand. What about psychological considerations? 40 years is a long time to be confined. Olivia nodded, having anticipated the question. The habitation areas are designed to mimic Earth environments, parks, open spaces, even simulated weather. The central ring contains a lake and forest preserve spanning 5 acres. She manipulated the display again, showing living quarters that ranged from family homes to single apartments, all designed to provide both community and privacy. Additionally, the ship contains recreational facilities, theaters, and virtual reality suites that can simulate any environment from Earth. The communication system will maintain contact with Earth for most of the journey, though with increasing time lag. Another key feature was the ship's ability to manufacture and repair virtually any component. Extensive fabrication facilities, powered by the same fusion reactors that drove the engines, could process raw materials harvested from the ice shield or stored in cargo holds. The computing systems represent another breakthrough, Michael added. Quantum computers with biological interfaces manage every aspect of the ship, from life support to navigation. The system is distributed throughout the vessel, with no single point of failure. Medical facilities rivaled those of major Earth hospitals, with capabilities ranging from emergency surgery to childbirth. Cryogenic chambers could preserve patients with conditions beyond the ship's treatment capabilities until arrival at Alpha Centauri. Perhaps most importantly, Olivia said, ending the tour at the ship's command center, every system on this vessel incorporates centuries of human spaceflight experience. We've learned from every mission, every failure, and every success since Yuri Gagarin first left Earth's atmosphere. As the hologram faded, Michael gazed at the delegation. The ancient Polynesians who crossed the Pacific had canoes designed over generations, incorporating the wisdom of their ancestors. Our starships follow that same tradition. They're the culmination of everything we've learned about living in space. The starships represented a new kind of vessel, not merely transportation, but carefully designed worlds unto themselves, carrying the seeds of humanity across the void between stars. The diplomatic chamber of United Earth Space Command headquarters in Geneva buzzed with tension as representatives from a dozen nations debated the final phase of the Centauri Initiative. Director Elizabeth Morgan watched the proceedings with a mixture of pride and concern, knowing that the challenges facing humanity's first interstellar mission extended far beyond engineering. The financial burden remains unprecedented, argued the representative from the African Union, gesturing to the holographic budget projections. 5 ships, each costing more than the entire global space budget of the 2020s. Elizabeth leaned forward. And yet, the technological spillover has already revolutionized Earth's economy. Fusion power plants based on starship designs now provide 30% of global energy. Medical technologies developed for long-duration spaceflight have extended human lifespans by decades. The room quieted, acknowledging the truth in her words. The Centauri Initiative had driven innovation at a pace unseen since the digital revolution of the late 20th century. There are ethical considerations as well, said the representative from Brazil. The children born during the journey will have no choice in their destination. They will be raised in an artificial environment, never knowing Earth except through recordings. Dr. William Taylor, the initiative's chief psychologist, addressed this concern. We've structured the entire mission around this reality. The educational systems, community design, even the governance structure acknowledges that we're creating a society, not just staffing a mission. The Chinese representative raised another point. And what of those left behind? The resources dedicated to these vessels could address pressing Earth problems. climate restoration, oceanic cleanup, desert reclamation. This sparked a heated exchange until Director Morgan raised her hand for silence. "Let me be clear," she said firmly. "This has never been an either slash or proposition. The technologies developed for interstellar travel, efficient resource recycling, closed ecological systems, advanced carbon capture, these are precisely the technologies needed to heal Earth." She activated a new holographic display showing Earth's environmental metrics over the past 20 years. Every indicator showed improvement: greenhouse gas concentrations falling, forest cover increasing, oceanic dead zones shrinking. The Centauri Initiative isn't occurring despite Earth's challenges. It's helping us overcome them. The discussion shifted to more practical concerns: communication protocols over interstellar distances, governance structures for the new colony, and contingency plans for various scenarios. Each challenge represented uncharted territory for humanity. "What about first contact protocols?" asked the Japanese representative. "While no biosignatures have been detected in the Alpha Centauri system, we must be prepared for the possibility of encountering non-terrestrial intelligence." This prompted a discussion of the extensive quarantine and observation procedures built into the mission plan. Humanity had no intention of repeating the mistakes of its colonial past. The debate continued for hours, touching on everything from genetic diversity requirements to cultural preservation strategies. Yet beneath the technical discussions lay a deeper question, one that the Russian representative finally voiced near the session's end. Are we truly ready for this leap? Not technologically, but as a species. Have we matured enough to carry human civilization to another star system without bringing our worst tendencies with us? The room fell silent until Professor David Johnson, historian and ethicist, spoke from the back of the chamber. "Throughout human history, our greatest achievements have come not when we were perfect, but when we aspired to be better," he said. "The pyramids, the great cathedrals, the moon landings, all were built by deeply flawed societies reaching beyond themselves." He walked to the center of the room, looking at each representative in turn. "We're not going to the stars because we've solved all our problems. We're going because the journey itself will help us become the civilization we aspire to be. The challenges we face don't disqualify us from making this leap. They're precisely why we must make it." As the session adjourned, Director Morgan knew that despite the difficulties ahead, humanity stood at the threshold of its greatest adventure, carrying not just people and technology to the stars, but hope, ambition, and the eternal human desire to transcend its limitations. The observation pod extended from the Endeavour's main hull, offering Marcus Powell an unobstructed view of the receding solar system. Earth was already indistinguishable from the other pinpricks of light, just another pale blue dot against the vastness of space. 3 months into their journey, the 5 starships maintained perfect formation, their fusion drives painting blue-white streaks against the darkness. "Thinking deep thoughts?" asked Dr. Emily Torres as she floated into the pod, securing herself to a nearby handhold. Marcus smiled. "Just contemplating the fact that we're moving faster than any humans in history. 36 million kilometers per hour and still accelerating." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting the distant stars. "By this time next year, we'll have passed the heliopause, true interstellar space." As the ship's chief exobiologist, Emily would likely be among the first to set foot on any potentially habitable worlds in the Alpha Centauri system. The preliminary surveys from automated probes had identified several promising candidates, including a super-Earth orbiting Proxima Centauri and 2 temperate moons circling a gas giant in Alpha Centauri's habitable zone. "I've been reviewing the latest transmission from Earth," Marcus said. "The technological advances since our departure are already substantial. The next generation of starships will be faster, more efficient." Emily turned to face him. "That's always been the plan. We're the pathfinders, but not the last. By the time we establish the colony, Earth will have launched the second wave." This was perhaps the most profound aspect of humanity's interstellar expansion. It wasn't a single mission, but the beginning of a migration. The planets and moons of Alpha Centauri would become stepping stones to more distant stars, creating an ever-expanding sphere of human influence. They've already broken ground on the first antimatter production facility in Mercury orbit, Marcus noted. The ships they're designing now could reach us within 15 years of our arrival. The long-term plans extended far beyond Alpha Centauri. Automated seed ships, smaller, faster vessels carrying genetic material and construction robots, were already being designed for launches to Tau Ceti, Epsilon Eridani, and a dozen other promising star systems within 20 light-years of Earth. "Have you visited the education center lately?" Emily asked. The children are designing their own visions of settlements on the Proxima planet. Some of their ideas are remarkable. The children represented the mission's future. Many would be middle-aged by the time the fleet reached Alpha Centauri. Their children and grandchildren would be the true settlers, born with no personal memory of Earth. "It's strange to think that we're already a separate branch of human society," Marcus mused. "Even with quantum communication, the time lag means we're developing independently from Earth. In a century, the differences might be substantial." This was not merely speculation. The Phi ships carried diverse populations, specifically selected to represent Earth's genetic and cultural heritage. Yet they would inevitably develop their own customs, linguistic variations, and social structures, the beginnings of a unique stellar culture. "I believe that's part of the mission's purpose," Emily replied. "Not just geographic expansion, but cultural diversification. Humanity is no longer keeping all its eggs in one planetary basket." As they talked, a notification chimed, informing all crew members that the first of the habitation rings had completed its agricultural cycle, a full harvest grown entirely in deep space. It was a milestone worth celebrating, another confirmation that the complex ecosystems of the ships were functioning as designed. "We should join the others," Marcus suggested, gesturing toward the central hub where a gathering was forming. As they made their way through the ship, passing families, engineers, and scientists going about their daily routines, the reality of their journey settled over them. They had become a traveling world, not just visitors to the cosmic ocean, but permanent inhabitants of it. At the celebration, Captain Rachel Wilson raised a glass of the first wine produced on board, made from grapes grown in the agricultural ring. "To the stars," she toasted, her voice carrying to all 5 ships via the inter-vessel communication network, "and to the future of humanity among them." The cheer that followed echoed throughout the fleet. 5 worlds in miniature carrying human dreams, human potential, and human determination outward into the galaxy that awaited them. 10 years into the journey, the Alpha Centauri expedition had settled into a rhythm that blended the ordinary with the extraordinary. In the hydroponics bay of the Discovery, Jack Bennett carefully inspected the experimental wheat varieties his team had developed, plants specifically engineered to thrive in the different gravity and light conditions they would encounter at their destination. "The adaptive genes are expressing exactly as we hoped," he explained to Amanda Wilson, the fleet's communication director who was preparing a documentary update for Earth. "These crops should transition to Centauri conditions with minimal shock." The ship's botany team had created a remarkable array of modified food sources during the decade of travel, plants that could withstand higher radiation, require less water, and produce greater yields in alien soil. It was just one example of how the journey itself had become a laboratory for innovation. "How does it feel knowing that your work will literally take root on another star system?" Amanda asked, recording his response for the billions back on Earth who followed the expedition's progress. Jack's eyes crinkled at the corners. "My great-grandmother was a botanist who worked on restoring damaged ecosystems after the climate crisis. She told me once that planting seeds was an act of hope. I guess I'm following in her footsteps, just a bit farther from home." Throughout the 5 vessels, similar scenes of progress and adaptation played out daily. In the engineering sections, teams had developed improved fusion containment methods that increased efficiency by 17%. The medical departments had pioneered new treatments for the subtle physiological changes caused by long-term space habitation. Even the ship's hulls had been modified, with programmable carbon lattice reinforcements that responded to micrometeorite impacts by automatically strengthening vulnerable areas. In the central community hub of the Pathfinder, Fleet Commander Diane Nelson addressed a gathering of representatives from all 5 ships, the quarterly council that governed the expedition. As we pass the decade milestone, it's worth reflecting on what we've accomplished, she began. We've not only maintained our course and systems, but improved upon the original designs in ways our planners couldn't have anticipated. The statistics supported her assessment. Energy efficiency had increased by 23%. Food production now exceeded consumption by a comfortable margin. The birth rate had stabilized at exactly the projected level needed for population sustainability. More importantly, she continued, we've begun to develop our own identity as a society. We are no longer simply Earth citizens in transit. We are becoming Centauri pioneers with our own customs, our own solutions, our own ways of thinking. This was evident in subtle cultural shifts throughout the fleet. New art forms had emerged that incorporated the unique experience of interstellar travel. Novel sports had been invented for the varying gravity environments. Even language had evolved, with technical terminology and slang specific to life aboard the starships. In the education center, children who had never seen Earth learned about both their ancestral home and their future one through immersive simulations. They studied terrestrial history alongside the theoretical conditions of their destination worlds. What's most remarkable about this generation, explained Dr. Mark Johnson, the fleet's lead education coordinator, is their perspective. They don't see themselves as displaced Earthlings, but as the first true citizens of 2 star systems. The expedition had faced challenges as well. The loss of a key experimental antimatter containment system had briefly threatened the fleet's communication capabilities. A previously unknown form of cosmic radiation had required additional shielding around certain biological systems. An unexpected stellar flare had forced course adjustments that consumed precious fuel reserves. Yet each obstacle had been overcome through the same human ingenuity and determination that had launched the mission. The fleet had proven not just resilient but adaptive, capable of evolving to meet unforeseen circumstances. As the expedition approached the halfway point of its journey, Earth itself was changing in response to the success of humanity's first interstellar mission. The second wave of starships was already under construction, incorporating lessons learned from the pioneers. More ambitious projects were being planned: permanent wormhole generators, relativistic light sails, even theoretical work on space-time manipulation that might one day make interstellar travel a matter of months rather than decades. We've unleashed something powerful, Jack told Amanda as they concluded their interview. Not just a technological revolution, but a change in how humanity sees itself in relation to the universe. He gestured toward the viewport where the distant spark of Alpha Centauri was now visibly brighter than the surrounding stars. Still unreachably distant, yet drawing closer with each passing second. For most of human history, we looked up at the stars and wondered. Now we look at them and plan. That's the real threshold we've crossed, from dreaming to doing. As the fleet continued its silent journey between the stars, the distance between humanity's past and its future grew with every moment, measured not just in light years, but in possibility. The command center of the Pioneer hummed with quiet tension as the fleet approached its final deceleration phase. After 39 years, 7 months, and 12 days of interstellar travel, Alpha Centauri had transformed from a distant point of light to a magnificent trinary star system filling their forward views. Captain Robert Daniels, his once dark hair now streaked with gray, studied the sensor readings with practiced precision. He had been a young officer when the journey began. Now he was among the most senior commanders, one of the diminishing number who remembered Earth firsthand. "Begin final approach sequence," he ordered, his voice carrying across the command network to all 5 vessels. "Magnetic sails at full deployment. Prepare for gravitational assistance maneuver." The response came immediately, as the tremendous magnetic sails, invisible to the naked eye, but spanning kilometers in diameter, extended to their maximum configuration. The massive fields began to interact with the stellar wind from Alpha Centauri A, creating drag that would help slow the fleet's still immense velocity. In the observation dome, crowds gathered to witness the approach. 3 generations stood side by side. The original crew from Earth, those born during the early years of the journey, and the youngest generation who had known nothing but life aboard the starships. Among them stood Maria Chen, age 28, born in the 15th year of the expedition. As the lead surveyor for the initial landing party, she would be among the first humans to set foot on the surface of Centauri Prime, the Earth-like moon orbiting the gas giant they had named Poseidon. "It's more beautiful than the simulations," she whispered, watching as the light of 3 suns played across the gas giant's swirling atmosphere. The habitable moon, visible as a blue-green crescent, showed clear signs of liquid water and carbon-based vegetation. The early probes had confirmed what the spectroscopic analysis had suggested. The moon harbored its own evolutionary path of simple plant-like organisms. The expedition's exobiologists had spent decades preparing for this moment, developing strict protocols to ensure that Earth species wouldn't disrupt the delicate alien ecosystem. Throughout the fleet, the mood was one of barely contained excitement mixed with solemn purpose. 39 years of preparation, adaptation, and anticipation had led to this moment. Equipment long stored was being readied for use. Landing craft were undergoing final checks. Survey teams reviewed topographical maps and atmospheric data. In the agricultural districts, specially prepared seedlings, the result of generations of careful genetic modification, waited in suspended animation for transplantation to their new home. Engineering teams finalized plans for the initial settlement structures that would house the first wave of colonists while more permanent habitations were constructed. "Attention all personnel," came Captain Daniel's voice over the fleet-wide communication system. "We have officially entered the Alpha Centauri system. Deceleration will continue for 27 days, after which we will establish stable orbit around Poseidon. May this moment be remembered as the beginning of humanity's existence as a multi-stellar species." A cheer erupted throughout the 5 vessels, not just from the observation areas, but from every section. People embraced, wept, laughed, and prayed according to their various customs. It was a moment of collective triumph that transcended individual experience. In the scientific section of the Endeavour, Dr. Laura Martinez, chief xenobotanist, received the first high-resolution scans of Centauri Prime's surface vegetation. The images confirmed what had only been theoretical until now: photosynthetic organisms using a chlorophyll analog to process the slightly different light spectrum of Alpha Centauri A. "It's working on the same fundamental principles as Earth life," she explained to her team, her voice trembling with excitement. "Carbon-based, water-dependent, but with novel molecular structures we've never seen before. This is everything we hoped for." The following weeks were a flurry of activity as the fleet carefully maneuvered into stable orbits. Survey craft deployed to analyze atmospheric conditions, map landing sites, and collect samples of the alien microbiome for further study. Engineers tested the compatibility of local materials with their manufacturing systems. Finally, exactly 40 years after departing Earth orbit, the first landing shuttle detached from the Pioneer. Aboard were Maria Chen and 11 other specialists: geologists, biologists, atmospheric scientists, and engineers, selected to evaluate the primary settlement location. As the craft descended through wispy clouds toward a coastal plain selected for its optimal conditions, Maria pressed her hand against the viewport, feeling the slight vibration as the alien atmosphere enveloped their vessel. "Landing struts deployed," reported the pilot. "Touchdown in 3, 2, 1. There was a gentle shock as the craft settled onto the surface of humanity's new home. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, following established protocol, the team began methodical environmental checks before the airlock could be opened. An hour later, dressed in a lightweight environmental suit designed to prevent biological cross-contamination. Maria Chen stood before the open airlock. Behind her, the 11 other team members waited. Before them stretched a landscape both alien and somehow familiar. Rolling hills covered in purple-tinted vegetation, an ocean glittering under the light of Alpha Centauri A, and a sky painted in subtle shades of turquoise. She took a deep breath and spoke the words that would be transmitted back to Earth, reaching their ancestral home 4.37 years in the future. From the shores of one pale blue dot to another, humanity has crossed the gulf between stars. Today we stand beneath new suns, not as conquerors or exploiters, but as humble witnesses to the wonder of a second cradle of life. May our presence here honor both the world that birthed us and this world that welcomes us. With those words, Maria Chen stepped forward onto the soil of Centauri Prime, the first human footprint on a world orbiting another star. The culmination of a journey that had begun not just 40 years earlier with the launching of the fleet, but countless millennia ago when the first humans looked up at the night sky and wondered what lay beyond. Humanity's next giant leap had been taken, and in that step, the species had been transformed from planetary beings into the children of multiple stars. Their future now is boundless as the cosmos itself.